This podcast has mature language, not intended for underage viewers.
Street cred sports. Street cred sports. I'm crossing over. I'm Euro stepping.
Hello, this is Keenan of Street Cred Sports Training, and welcome to another episode of Time to Ball. I hope everyone is doing well. This is episode 46. Well, I had to take a week off. I had a sinus infection, and whenever I get those, it really strains my voice. So I didn't want to be on the mic talking, and it sounded like dead air. I'd be like, yeah. So I had to get that out. So what I'm gonna do is instead of doing a bonus, I'm gonna do a two-part. So it is gonna be two parts to today for episode 46. Hope you enjoyed. It was a lot of stuff that was going on that I was able to put down, and I was like, man, I don't want to have to wait for 2 different weeks, so I'll just do two part 1 and part 2. So welcome to part 1 of episode 46. We are very close to Thanksgiving, and the time of year where everybody, wants to eat their favorite food and dessert. So, have fun with your loved ones. Don't eat too much. Take your traditional nap. And something that I used to do growing up is me and my friends, we used to say we were going to start fasting. So we would start fasting like Wednesday. Sometime Wednesday during the day, we wouldn't eat until it was time for Thanksgiving because we wanted to eat as much food as we could. I don't fast as much. I always say I'm a fast, but I don't fast much. I'll be like, man, what the hell was we thinking about when we was doing that? Man, that's crazy. Like, oh man, I didn't eat nothing since 12, and then they don't cook until evening. So, some people traditionally when they cook Thanksgiving, it's an evening thing. I like to have Thanksgiving like around noonish or 1 or so I can eat, relax, and then maybe eat again. Because you always overeat on Thanksgiving. No matter how hard you try not to, you always overeat. And I think maybe that was because of the fasting things we used to do. So don't fast out there, people. Eat a sensible dinner today and just be ready for tomorrow. So on behalf of Street Cred Sports and Time to Ball, I want to tell everybody happy Thanksgiving in advance. All right, so let me get to some things that are on my mind. I'm actually doing the show from the facility. I had to get in here early, so I might have to stop. I had some maintenance work to be done and stuff, so if I have to stop, it feels a little choppy is because I had people coming in and out. But moving forward, question is it easy to tell people to have their kids learn basketball? Or should I say, well, okay, let me rewind that, because it's just like I'm just saying it without people understanding. Like I consume a lot of content, and I hear you're gonna always hear stuff on both sides of the aisle. So you never want to think that something that you like is gonna be liked or liked by everybody. It's always gonna be somebody that disagrees with something. That's just the nature of the world we live in. But I heard someone discussing training, and they were saying, well, kids today, they don't, everybody's trying to get a trainer, and you don't have to have a trainer, and training doesn't really help like you think it should. You should just get out and play more, and then you get better. And I'm pushing back, or I disagree with that in one area. Like, look, there are some kids, like, okay, for me, I didn't have a trainer. I was self-taught. I taught myself everything. I worked on everything. Now, obviously, you have to have a natural gift for things, and I felt like I did, and I was always told, So obviously, there are going to be athletes that you might not have to have a trainer when it comes to certain things. Now, I always ask myself, would I have been a better player back then if I had somebody like myself? And I feel absolutely, because my ball handling was really good. I could cross over between. I could do all this fundamental stuff with the speed and stuff. But there were certain things that I never even thought about putting together when it came to combination dribbles and, certain moves. So if I was working myself out, I would have been able to give myself, a lot more knowledge than what I had back then. And then you hear certain things, so you soak it in. So if you're listening, to somebody who, has a good pulse and knows what's going on, you soak that energy up and you go with it, and it helps you, your ball IQ, your understanding and stuff, things that you should probably stay away from or not do as much, taking care of your body. That's one thing I never really even thought about as much, because when you're young, you're just playing. So I feel it's valuable. Now, the main reason I feel it's valuable is not every kid is going to possess knowledge or have the type of core, around them that knows some things that can kind of help teach. I get a ton of parents or new kids where the parents are like, you know what, he or she just started liking basketball. They just start liking it. Nobody in our family has ever played it, so they're looking help because they don't know how to help them. So naturally it would be on an organization to be able to help that kid. Now the kid's only going to go as far as the kid goes, as far as working out, training and stuff. But I strongly feel there are layers. Not everybody's going to be the greatest player in the world. Every team throughout the history of high school, college, pros, there are lots of really good role players. There are lots of good practice players, kids who don't really play. So there are different levels to it, and I really and it's not really just because this is what I'm doing, because I was sought out even before I started doing this to help people. And I didn't understand it then. I was like, man, what are you talking about? You just get out there and practice. But now knowing what I know, to be able to accelerate and help a kid, know enough to be able to get on the floor and not be, overwhelmed with what to do, that's priceless. So I get, part of me gets what the person was saying. I was on Instagram, and I kind of get it, because I don't ever want to be a person like, oh man, you just hating. No, I don't think the person was hating. I get what they were saying. Now I don't know, because a lot of times when you're talking now, sometimes you're not specific to exactly what you mean. So when you talk, it kind of comes across general. So I try to be specific. Sometimes I'm general because it's a general thing, but in this case, I wished he would have been a little bit more specific to what he was referring to. I've heard some where they were specific to him, like, man, why y'all out here showing him all these step back hesitation moves? That's not needed, and that's true. I agree with that. There's only so many ways you can hezzy step back pull up shot, right? And thing is that everybody does it so much, you kind of get to know what they're doing. It's almost like a factory. So I feel strongly that not everybody's going to be able to learn how to play basketball. And I've had some parents who said that they wish they had something like this because they didn't know what to work on and if they were doing things right. And that's the role we play, is by showing kids stuff and then correcting them and making sure they understand it and giving them the tools and stuff like that. And it's not all about trying to put a kid in their bag and all these high level moves. If you have kids like that, yeah, but majority of the work is introducing kids to fundamentals and teaching them and stuff like that. So I didn't agree with it. I kind of think I understood where they were going, but I just wish they would have gave a little bit more context. Next, I'm going to talk about high school basketball. Now, this isn't a rant. This is just an observation and a suggestion. Man, I obviously ain't nobody out there listening to me. I'm just talking as if I'm the only person in the world, and I think I have an audience of millions of followers, right? Okay, so there are far too many players, and I'm speaking in high school terms, and middle school as well, but in high school specifically, there are far too many programs that have players that don't understand how to play. You know, they don't have the skill level necessary to perform at an acceptable level. So my question is it time to evaluate programs that can't put a quality product on the floor to not have the program, right? So I've actually heard from a few coaches that they had to go and find players because they didn't have enough players to field teams. And what I was told is, I know there were a couple of high schools, and I think it was more on the girls' side. On the boys' side, you tend to have tons of kids. Now, not all of them can play, but you still have a bigger pool, so you can at least field the team. I think the problem has, from my understanding, has been more on the girls' side. At least that's what I was told. I'm not saying it's only on the girls' side, but it seems to be like that. There was instances, like I said, where they had to go try to find players. Now, in colleges, sometimes colleges will go from Division One to Division Three or NAIA. Sometimes colleges will just cut that program. Now, maybe it's lack of funds. Maybe they're fielding an okay product, but that product isn't generating enough income to take care of it. We all know that some colleges, the football program probably funds the whole entire athletics from all the different sports because they bring in so much money. But what I'm speaking of is you can look it up sometimes. This school will be not having a lacrosse program going forward or a basketball program going forward. There was a junior college that I was one of the first ones, Tohono. They just cut the basketball program. They had a good junior college basketball program for girls and boys. They were in the thick of things when they started, and they were ascending, and they cut the program. And it wasn't really about money. I can speak on it. It just seemed like the president didn't really like basketball, which was odd because it brought in a lot of attention, money and stuff like that. They wanted track, and I know they wanted more stuff for the native kids, and I think you could have put a system in place to where you were recruiting native kids. And I know for a fact that the coaches tried recruiting, but sometimes those kids don't want to play, right? So they were trying to win, right? And that's the thing. Like you want to do it. Like I say, okay, I'm gonna do something, and it's only gonna be for El Paso kids. All right, that's cool. And everybody's all, that's great. You're trying to do something for the community. Yeah, well, if we're not winning. If we're not winning, that community support starts to wane, and they're like, well, why aren't you winning? You need to be winning. And then they stop coming unless you're winning. Like UTEP's a prime example. Now, although they don't always recruit locally, and that's a subject for another time, community only gets behind it if you're winning. It's very rare that a community is just going to support something because maybe it's not anything else to do, so they just go because that's all they have. Okay, but colleges do takeaway programs. So why not look at high schools, and let's start with the high schools that are having problems fielding, a team. Just eliminate the team. This for the look back and say, for the past 5 years, we haven't had enough kids to field our freshmen. So we're going to eliminate our freshman unit, and any girl who's coming in as a freshman, that they will have to play JV. It kind of sucks, but you kind of have to do it. Maybe you make 2 JVs if you have so many JV kids, because then you're gonna have freshmen, sophomore, and junior. So maybe you have a JV that's just all juniors if you have enough, and then you have one comprised of freshmen and sophomore. I don't know how you do it. Well, because then somebody say, well, then why don't you just keep the freshmen? Yeah, well, you can't do that, because if you don't have that many freshmen, that's the problem. I don't hear a lot of JV and varsity. I hear a lot of freshmen. It's hard to fill the freshman team. Now, I'm going to go a step further. If you have programs that are just not putting quality products out there, meaning you're having And I'm not just saying freshmen. I'm saying freshmen, JV, and varsity. You have schools where you don't have enough, like they're not even competitive. And everybody listening to this can probably in their head think of 5 schools off the top of their head when they hear me say that maybe that school shouldn't have a high school program for athletics, for basketball, or for whatever it is. You think about it, there are a lot of schools that don't have a swimming program, right? There are some schools that have a swimming program. There are some schools that have a rifle program, and other schools that don't. So not every school is going to have all of the different sports, and you figure, well, why not? I mean, it's not fair to those freshmen. Yeah, but you don't have freshmen coming to play. If you're having trouble, look, generally coaches want to have at least 10 girls. That's a good group of, at least, because you can at least scrimmage each other, work on different things. If you have 6 or 7 girls, it's hard to practice. If you have 8 girls, it's hard to practice. You need at least a solid 10 to 12 to be able to practice, right? So if you're not having those, then you just move those, 6 or 7 girls up to JV, or boys up to JV, and then you go there. But the other side of that is, I don't like going to see freshman games, sophomore, junior JV games, varsity games. I don't like going to see games where they're being slaughtered. I saw a game where it was Pebble Hills and Austin. It was obviously going to be a mismatch, but it was a freshman game, and that score was, I want to say it was 65-5. Austin didn't score until the last 3 minutes of the game, when the kid who had been shooting all game finally hit a 3, and then he shot layup. I mean, he got fouled and shot some free throws. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a 65-5 score. I don't want to see refs allowing things to go because, they look at it and it's like, okay, well, we're not going to call as much. I saw that in the girls' freshman game. They weren't calling stuff because if they kept blowing the whistle, the game would have probably been 4 hours, because you could call it on everything. So they just had to find a balance, and they allowed certain things to go. And the crazy thing it was good, but it was crazy. Parents and coaches weren't screaming about, hey, that's a travel. Hey, that's a this. They weren't saying that because I think everybody in there understood, man, these kids are struggling. They're doing their best. I love the fact that they're doing their best, but we got to get better at developing them. They need to know how to dribble up the court against some pressure. They need to know how to make passes, and do the basic things. I'm not saying that everybody is entitled to play the sport. What I'm saying is, if you don't have enough good kids that can really play and compete, maybe you should not have that product. It sounds horrible. Oh, that's not fair. There are a lot of things that aren't fair. There are some that can and some that can't. So my question for anybody who says, well, that's not fair, then my question would be, well, what are you doing to ensure that those kids are at least have an understanding? Look, I've volunteered and done some pro bono work with some organizations and some teams and some schools to try to help those kids to at least understand what was going on, so they had at least a chance. So, before somebody sits up and says, oh, well, no, what are you doing to help? Or you guys taking these girls out to try to practice because the coaches are limited? So only so much they can do, right? So what is that community doing to help those kids to get better? So they at least know what they're doing. Some do and most don't. But the stuff that I'm seeing is sad. It's really sad. Kids don't know how to play. They don't know how to dribble. They don't know how to pass. And this is boys and girls. I saw a boys game, freshman game, where it was turnover after turnover after turnover, terrible pass after terrible pass, terrible defense. not knowing how to play without their hands. Now, obviously, defense is it's going to be a little bit more learned. And, when you're a freshman, you're not really understanding how to play good quality man-to-man defense without using your hands. So that is more of a pass. But I saw some JV games where it was a little bit of that. And it's like, by your sophomore year, you need to know how to play standard defense. If the kid's too quick, you need to decide how to use something to your advantage or something. So, but that was what I wanted to say. It was hard to watch, and I think it is something that should be looked at. Okay, so now, last time I went on a parent rant. Today I'm gonna go on an evaluator rant, and best believe there's gonna be a coach's rant, because I know some coaches that be ranting to me. So here's my as an evaluator and a scout. I'm not an official. I haven't tried to do anything official. It's just I've been tasked with doing it, and I put in some time with doing it, and which not like I had to learn anything. I just went and watched games with other scouts and kind of picked up some tips and stuff that or just asked them about different things to make sure my thought process was the same. And having a NBA agent and college coaches and scouts tell me that that I had a good eye for what I was seeing through conversation. Hey, I you recognize that. That's cool. I like that. That makes me understand that I know what I'm doing. So with all of that saying, a problem that I know that college coaches have when they do ask me about certain things, because El Paso is kind of tough to find when it comes to a lot of stuff. The Max Prep, the info, is a really good tool, coaches, that you can utilize by just putting in basic information. The players, player's profile as far as their height, whether they're junior, senior, their position. You don't have to have all of the breakdown stats like the analytics and stuff, but I think if you had, your first of all, your team's name. I mean, not team's name, your roster. Gotta have your roster. Now, if you can have your stats for each game, it makes it easy when you're putting it in. You put that information in, then a school who's calling me and asks me, hey, what do you think about this kid? I don't know. And they're like, well, I can't find any information. I can't look them up in Max Prep. That would help that school to be able to visibly see what that kid can what that kid's able to do. Now, the good thing about Max Prep is you're able to put up stuff that shows what a kid is doing, citywide versus state, regions versus state versus national. So if you got a kid who's averaging 38 points, you got to get those stats in there, because when they probably type in high point scorers in the nation, 38 is going to come up. So you could have a local kid in the top 20 in the nation scoring. That's going to bring attention to that kid, to that program, to the city, for sports. So I believe the football, I've never really looked into football, but I think the football is ahead with a lot of stuff they do. I could be totally off. And I know some high schools do it, but some need to really invest a little bit more time. You can get parents. I mean, parents, the Booster Club, they're eager to help. Task them with putting information in there. It doesn't take long to do it, but tell you what, it is a turnoff if I try to look at somebody's schedule and I missed a game and I'm trying to look to see how that team did. And some don't even have their scores. They don't even have their scores. So to have the scores, but then not to see who rebounded well, or they had turnovers and stuff. It is kind of difficult. So please, coaches, please try to get better with putting all of that information on there. Or, well, not the head coaches, because the head coaches got a lot of stuff going on. So I know it's not, and the head coaches do so much. You have your assistants, or you can have somebody to enter it. I don't see how it's a problem, but if it is, let me know, and I'll come back and say, hey, you know what, it's not as easy as what I thought it would be, but there should be a system in place to try to help get things going. Because if any especially you want to highlight your kids, that gives them an opportunity for some place to see them. The other thing I want to rant about is kids not understanding what a travel is with their pivot. I think I saw 6 times where a kid, dribbled. I think they jump stop or they 1-2, so that wasn't what was called. And then they were pivoting, so they didn't pick their pivot foot up. What they did is they turned their foot like on their side, so the bottom of their foot is not touching the ground. That is a travel, and for some reason, a lot of kids don't understand it. Now, I actually tell my kids when they do it, that's a travel. You can't do that. Your foot needs to be on the ground. You can't lift it to the side or the tip. Part of the bottom of your feet has to be on the ground. Has to be touching the floor. If it's not, it's gonna be a travel. And I saw kids, and then they give this, what? And they're looking around, and they're looking at their coach, and then parents are like, oh, that wasn't a travel. And I'm sitting up here thinking, I don't even think these people know what a travel is. Some people think, oh, well, if you lift your pivot foot, then yes, travel. No. You have a some referees, you have to have 50% of the bottom of your foot touching the floor. Others would be a little bit lenient to where if you come and it's like maybe the ball of your feet up to your toes, if that part's touching, yeah, they might not call it. Now, if it's up like that and your foot kind of slides, they're gonna call it. If your foot slides anywhere, they're gonna call it, right? But yeah, you can be stationary, but you're on the side of your foot, and it's a travel, and they're like, what are they talking about? That wasn't a travel. So that is a rant, because I hate everybody hates watching bad basketball. Okay. The funniest thing is watching kids who think they're really, really good, and there's really bad basketball, right? A kid will hit a 3, and a lot of that is, what you see right now in the NBA, and everybody mimics it. I know I mimicked stuff when I was smaller, but you hit a shot and then they do the bow celebration, or they do the 1, 2, 3 celebration, or they do the ice in the veins celebration. But they've shot 15 times. That's the only shot that they made. And it's like, you can't do the ice celebrations when you're 1 for 15. You can be excited, but you got to understand what those celebrations mean. That means that you are knocking down shots. So it is cute watching the kids do those things, and I get it. I don't get turned off by the fact that I know there are a lot of people today that get turned off and what are showboating and stuff, and it's a different time. You have to understand it, but you do need to be in context, because I had a kid once. He made his shot. He was doing a shooting drill, and he came up, and then he made his shot, and then he did the little ice thing, right? So then we kept going, and then he missed like his next 7 shots. So then I stopped and said, so where's the ice in the veins? He's like, oh, well, I just made the first one. I said, yeah. I said, you can't be saying ice in your veins if you go 1 for 9, man. Now, if you make the last shot of the game to win the game, I'll ride with that. Even though I'll be like, oh, well, you just knocked down 1, but it was to win the game. So I can ride with that. But if you go 1 for 9 and the 1 is the first one and you miss like 8 in a row, you can't be doing that. You got to make that. And I explained to him, that's more of a heat check thing. When you're knocking it down and you're feeling it, yeah, you can take it. He was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, coach. I said, no, I get it, but I wanted to let you understand the context and everything. And he said he was thankful for it, because he doesn't like to do stuff that he likes to make sure he understands it. And I said it's very important, because if you don't understand what you're doing, you're gonna maybe not look as cool as what you think it was. And I got it was cute that he wanted to be cool. So, but that's all the ranting that I have when it comes to those things. All right, so now I'm gonna move on to my basketball ideology. Okay. Uh, Too many times, and I try my best to do it, and sometimes I slip up. It's teaching kids to know when to make a move and when not to. And I think the problem is kids are doing moves when they're not needed and not doing moves when needed. So let me give you an example. Kid could be driving towards the right side of the 3-point line. Now he's past the defender. So, but instead of just driving to the lane to get a layup, he kind of hesitates and does a between behind and spin. Now when he does that, the defender is back in front of him, and now he's not able to get to where he needs to be. So that excessive ball dribbling that he did in that instance didn't work, and it wasn't needed. Now, let's take the same situation where the kid was dribbling and he was dribbling to the right. The defender was overplaying him, and all it was needed was just a simple, spin move off of that defender, and he would have been able to get to the basket. But he doesn't. He kind of retreat dribbles and resets. So that's an example of doing a move when you didn't need, doing something when you didn't need it, and then also not doing it when you needed it. And the reason it caught my eye was because I was watching a clip, and it was a highlight, and you try to gather as much information it is, because they're really just highlighting on whatever move or part that looks nice. And in this kid, you could tell that the kid he was dribbling at the top from maybe the half court. He was dribbling left, trying to attack, and the defender was right in front to just behind. And just as the offensive player was going to drive, get his shoulders turned and get past him, the defender was able to get a step to kind of cut him off and get in front of him. Right as he did that, the offensive player just spin moved beautifully. It was a spin move. Then after he spin move, he went up like you're taught, show the ball early. They jump, then you can go up and under with a scoop layup, right? Now, it wasn't a scoop layup that I loved. It was him understanding when he needed to spin and why. So to me, it is important, and I do break that down with kids when I'm telling them about the drive, right? I tell them, look, if you're in between the defender's elbows, you're probably going to need a bump to try to get that defender off of you if you're closing in on the basket. If you're outside of that front elbow, or like just in front, you can use your body to kind of step in front of the defender to kind of gain an advantage and create some space. If the defender is more in front of you, then it's going to be easy to counter move, whether it's a spin move, between, cross, behind. I usually like tell them to go between, behind, or maybe spin move. Spin move, you really need to know where that's there, because as you're turning, if you're not paying attention, you don't see how close the help side is. But a lot of times, unless they're right there, you most of the time you get through, you can squeeze through with it. But behind the back and between the legs are probably the best in that instance when you're going to counter, because of the fact that you're still able to see, you got your shoulder squared, you're able to see what's coming. So it is a little bit more understanding when somebody's defending you, when you need to make a certain move and when you don't need to, right? And that's important because you have kids over dribbling and over doing what they need to do, and instead of making a simple move. So you don't want an excessive amount of dribbling. But I really think that it was important, and I wish I could have saved that clip to show, because it really hits home that point. You can see it. I mean, some people aren't going to see it, but to the untrained eye, you're not really paying attention. But to the trained eye, you can see Like it's almost like the thought process, like in that split second, all of that stuff is hitting, and he's making the correct move. All right, so next thing I want to talk about is when to get a bucket if your team is struggling. Now, the reason I say that is because, I've seen on all levels, which is kind of surprising, on all levels where you allow teams to go on 10-0 runs, 12-0 runs. Now, you rarely see a team get over 12 points or 12-0 run without a timeout. So you'll hear, it was a 20-4 run. Well, yeah, it was a 20-4 run, but there might have been 2 or 3 timeouts in between. That team just didn't score. It wasn't straight. Now, I think I've seen, I can't remember. I don't want to even say it because I don't remember a time where a team was able to score a 20-0 run without a timeout or a stoppage. But, it could have happened. So my philosophy, my thought process is after 6 points, if you have a guy who's the best player on your team, they usually should understand that the rhythm is off with the offense. Maybe they're being a little overly aggressive and they're trying to take away what you do. You got to have a player that can get a bucket on his or her own, because sometimes you can't get buckets running your offense. It looks great in practice, it looks great in scrimmage, but when you're playing a team that presents different problems, sometimes you're going to struggle offensively to get a basket. So having a player on your team that you can just, okay, look, I need to settle this down and I need to get us a bucket, right? I think it's important because, look, sometimes coaches get caught up and they might not take a timeout and their assistants are watching other thing. And, before you know it, it's like, damn, they went on a 14-0 run. Yeah, okay, all right. And it's quick. Maybe it's a steal. Maybe you got some good possessions, within it, and you missed shots and they got out on the break and stuff, and they finished. They made baskets. So I've seen it happen, but I guess the reason I heard on a podcast they was talking about guys, difference between a guy who can just get buckets and guys who know how to get timely buckets. And what they were saying is, yeah, this guy he's gonna score, he's gonna shoot, he's gonna score, but when it's a timely manner where you need an actual bucket, you might not be able to have it. I'm going to pause it right for a second because there's a train and it's distorting everything. Okay, all right, so I'm back. Let me get to where I was talking about. Sorry about that. You might hear a little feedback on the other part, but the adventures of doing the show on the road, the train was coming in and it was picking up stuff. So there's a lot of stuff in the background and just rather stop it real quick. But let me get back to what I was saying about the difference. They were talking about difference between getting players that can score. They just get buckets, they score. And then it was players who know when they need to get a bucket. And the example they were using was Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I believe I got his name right. He plays with OKC. And they were saying, the kid's special. He can get buckets whenever he wants. And he tends to know when to get a bucket. And he does. Now, there have been some times that I've seen him play that he probably should have looked to pass it, when he drew a double team. But, I guess, when if you're the guy, your job is to get buckets and, you're going to forego passing sometimes. But I think in the flow of the game, sometimes you got to know, okay, yeah, I can get this bucket, but now when I get here, they're doing this. So now I need to adjust and hit my guy in the corner for a shot. And that's going to help me make this next time I get the same shot easier, because that defender's not going to want to help as much if my guy hits the shot. But all in all, having a person who can get a bucket when they need to and have a pulse of the team and the situation is important because, basketball is a game of runs. You're going to have some games where it's just back and forth, lead change, back and forth, back and forth. But a lot of times you have where a team will go on a, 10-4, not 10-4 run, like a 12-4 run, and then that other team might respond with a 10-2 run, so you're going to have games of runs, but you want to be able to see that, okay, we need to settle down because if you're the best player, your teammates are going to look to you to try to help the situation, and if everybody's going to be, sometimes, you panic, you get antsy, you try to push because you feel that the momentum's changed. You don't want to get down by a lot. You press to try to make something happen and you sometimes make mistakes and things can snowball. You got to have that player that's just like, I got the ball. Let's settle down. We have a play or whatever, and I'm going to get a basket, right? And I'm going to settle this down and stop the bleeding, as they say, and stop the momentum and put us back on where we were before. So I do believe in that. I strongly believe in you should have a player, your best player, that should be able to get a bucket. Now, if your best player can only get a bucket for you through plays, you have to be the best team in the world to be able to execute plays, because there's always big gaps where plays aren't executed the way they need to. They put pressure on somebody within that play and the play's not ran the way it needs to, right? You see a lot of teams running plays, early on, but once the defense kind of figures it out, you're not able to get as great a looks the whole game, I guess I'll say. For the most part, if you practice, you execute, you have all these wrinkles, variants out of those plays, you're able to get, pretty much any shot. But there are times when the defense is just that good that, okay, yeah, we stopping all of that. You're not getting what you think you're going to get. That's when you got to have somebody that can get a bucket. So that's all I felt with that. I just really felt like you really need to have that. So with that, I'm going to end part 1. Okay, I'm going to end part 1. So I'm going to end it the way I always do and say if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. I'm out.
Street cred sports, say it with your chest. Yeah. Go get it from the net. Street cred sports, okay, that's a bet.